History of chess. Over the roughly 1.5 millennia of its existence, chess had been known as a tool of military strategy, a metaphor for human affairs, and a benchmark of genius. Earliest record exists during the 7th century. Chess started when the youngest prince of Gupta Empire was killed in a battle. His brother was devised a way of representing the scene to their grieving mother. Set on the 8x8 Ashtapada board used for other popular pastimes, a new game emerged. With two key features, different rules for moving, different types of piece, and a single king piece whose fate determined the outcome of the game. The game was originally known as Chaturanga, a Sanskrit word for four divisions, but with its spread to Sassanid Persia, it acquired its current name and terminology, chess. Chess is derived from the word Shah, meaning king, and a checkmate from Shanat, or the king is helpless. After the 7th century, Islamic conquest of Persia chess was introduced to the Arab world, transcending its role as a tactical simulation. It eventually became a rich source of poetic imagery. Diplomats and courtiers used chess terms to describe political power. Ruling caliphs become avid players themselves, and historian Al-Mas'udi considered the game a testament to human free will. Compared to games of chance, medieval trade along the Silk Road carried the game to East and Southeast Asia, where many local variants developed. By 1000 AD, the game had become part of courtly education. Chess was used as an allegory for different social classes, performing their proper roles, and the pieces were reinterpreted in their new context. At the same time, the church remained suspicious of games. Moralist caution against devoting too much time to them, with chess even being briefly banned in France. Yet the game proliferated, and the 15th century saw it cohering into the form we know today. The relatively weak piece of advisor was recast as the more powerful queen, perhaps inspired by the recent surge of strong female leaders. This change accelerated the game's pace, and as other rules were popularized, treatises analyzing common openings and endgames appeared. Chess theory was born with the Enlightenment era. The game moved from royal courts to coffee houses. Chess is now seen as an expression of creativity, encouraging bold moves and dramatic plays. This romantic style reached its peak in the immortal game of 1851, where Adolf Andersen managed a checkmate after sacrificing his queen and both rooks. But the emergence of formal competitive play in the late 19th century meant that strategic calculation would eventually trump dramatic flair, and with the rise of international competition, chess took on new geopolitical importance. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union devoted great resources to cultivating chess talent, dominating the championships for the rest of the century. But the player who would truly upset Russian dominance was not a citizen of another country, but an IBM computer called Deep Blue. Chess playing computer had been developed for decades, but Deep Blue's triumph over Garry Kasparov in 1997 was the first time a machine had defeated a sitting champion. Today, chess software is capable of consistently defeating the best human player, but just like the game they've mastered, these machines are products of human ingenuity, and perhaps that same ingenuity will get us out of this apparent checkmate. Chess equipments and facilities. Equipments of chess are the most important in the modern day. Chess is an early game. For this, it saw a number of evolutions. All the equipments in chess are the tangible items. One of these equipment is chess set. It usually means a board plus pieces. The important thing about a chess set is that it should be aesthetically pleasing. The size and the color of the pieces should match the size and color of the squares on the board. Next on the list is the chess pieces. The most familiar and popular pieces follow the Stanton pattern, first registered in 1849 by Nathaniel Cook. Stanton pieces are required for most tournaments. They are normally made from wood or plastic. although other materials can be used. Another one is the chess box. Chess box is a container for holding chess pieces. It is most commonly made of wood, but some of the chess boxes are made up of plastic. We have chessboard. Although most chessboards are diagrammed with white and dark gray squares, very few boards use those colors or use white and black. Boards are also sold built into the table. The board should have adequate borders to place the clock and captured pieces. And then the chess clock. The first clocks used in the 19th century were sunglasses, which keep track of each player's times on different devices. These were soon changed by two connected analog clocks. One player's clock starts as soon as the other player has made a move and punched the clock. Aside from that is the chess bag. This is used to carry the board pieces, clock, and supplies that are necessity for the tournament player. The last one is the score sheets, used for recording the moves by facilities. The chess was usually held in a closed and quiet room, a well-ventilated room where they can focus on the game, with no distraction that may interfere. Usually in school, the tournament happens at a library, basketball court, and even in an empty classroom. Chess pieces and their movement. The pawn is the most numerous and the least powerful piece on the chessboard. Pawns are unusual in their movement. Generally, the pawn moves forward only, one square at a time. An exception is the first time a pawn is moved. It may move forward two squares. The pawn cannot jump over other pieces. Any piece directly in front of a pawn blocks its advance to that square. The pawn is the only piece that cannot move backward. The pawn is the only piece that does not capture in the same way that it moves. The pawn captures an opposing piece by moving diagonally one square. It cannot capture by moving straight ahead. Next one is the bishop. The bishop moves in a straight line diagonally on the board. It can move as many squares as wanted until it meets the end of the board or another piece. The bishop cannot jump over other pieces. It captures in the same path it moves by landing on the square of the opposing piece. Because of the way bishop moves, the piece always remains on the same color squares it started on. Each player begins with two bishops, one on the black colored and one of the white colored. They are frequently referred to as the dark squared bishops and the light squared bishops. The bishops can also be named according to the side they begin on: king's bishops and the queen's bishops. Then we have the rook. The rook moves in a straight line either horizontally or vertically through any number of unoccupied squares until it reaches the end of the board or it is blocked by another piece. It cannot jump over other pieces. The rook captures on the same path it moves by occupying the square on which an empty piece stands. The rook can land on any square on the board. Therefore, it is one of the more powerful pieces on the board. The rook is also involved in a special move, castling. It is the castling move where a rook and the king are grouped into a defensive position. Next on the list is the queen. The queen is considered the most powerful piece on the board. It can move any number of squares in a straight line, either vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. The queen moves like the rook and bishop combined, unless capturing the queen must move to an unoccupied square, and it cannot jump over other pieces too. The queen captures on the same path it moves by landing on the square of the opposing piece. The last one is the king. The king is the most important piece in chess. If the king is trapped, so that means capture is unavoidable. The game is over and that player loses. The king has little mobility, so it is also considered one of the weakest pieces in the game. The king can move to any adjacent square. That is, it can move one square in any direction, either horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. It cannot move into a square occupied by a piece of the same color. The king captures another piece in the same way it moves, by landing on the square of the opposing piece. There is an additional limit on the movement of the king. The king may not move to a square which would put the king under attack by an opposing piece. It was called a check. As a result of this limit, two kings may never stand next to each other, since moving next to the opposing king would put the moving king into a check. The king can also be forced to move or capture if the king is under attack, check. And the only way to stop the attack is move the king.